Okay, so let's just jump right into the big question. Can that loofah, the one you might use for washing dishes or scrubbing your back, actually be turned into a stealth coating for an advanced aircraft? It sounds completely out there, I know, but some new research is suggesting it might not be science fiction. Let's dig in and see how.
So take a look at these two things. On one side, you've got the humble, natural, fibrous loofah, and on the other, a cutting-edge stealth fighter, the peak of aerospace engineering. Connecting these two seems almost impossible, right? But what if it's not?
And there you have it. This isn't just a wild idea. According to reports on a recent scientific paper, a team of researchers has actually done it. They've developed a coating that comes from a loofah, and it's designed specifically to absorb radar signals. So the real question is, how in the world did they pull that off?
To really get it, we first have to look at the transformation. I mean, how do you take a simple plant and turn it into something that could potentially hide a fighter jet? It's a really fascinating bit of material science. Well, the process laid out in the research is kind of like a high-tech cooking recipe. First, you take a dried loofah and you carbonize it. Basically, you cook it at a super high temperature, 700 degrees Celsius, until all you have left is this lightweight carbon skeleton. Next, they soak that skeleton in a solution of nickel and cobalt salts. Then, through a special process, they actually grow tiny magnetic nanoparticles right onto those carbon fibers. One final blast of heat, and you've got the finished product, a composite material they call NCO2. And this diagram, which is right from their paper, gives you a great visual of that whole process. You can see it going from the whole loofah to its basic fibrous network, then to that same network coated with all those little particles, and finally, the finished material. It's a journey from something that grows in a garden to a high-tech lab creation.
Okay, so they made the stuff. But how does it actually work? This is where we get into the cool physics of absorbing radar, which is really just the science of trying to become invisible to electronic eyes.
Now, before we go any further, there's one key idea we've got to talk about: radar cross-section, or RCS. Put simply, RCS is just how big or bright something looks on a radar screen. A giant bomber has a massive RCS. A tiny bird has a really small one. The whole game with stealth technology is to make something huge, like a jet, have the RCS of something much, much smaller. So this loofah material does that using a combination of 4 really smart tricks. First step is what they call the maze effect. The loofah's natural spongy structure acts like a tiny jungle. When radar waves go in, they get trapped, bouncing around all over the place until they just run out of energy. Second, the carbon fibers themselves are conductive, and they turn that radar energy into a little bit of heat. Third, those magnetic nanoparticles we talked about, they absorb even more energy through something called magnetic loss. And finally, you've got impedance matching. This is just a fancy way of saying the material is designed to welcome radar waves in, like a smooth ramp into a parking garage, instead of being a flat wall that they just bounce right off of. And this diagram from the paper, it does a great job of showing what's happening inside. Each part of the graphic shows a different one of those mechanisms at work. You've got the multiple reflections, the conductive loss from the carbon, something called polarization, and the magnetic loss. It's like a whole team of effects working together to make that radar wave disappear. So the theory makes sense, but did it actually perform well? Let's take a look at the hard numbers from their lab tests.
And it's important to remember, this isn't just some claim they made in a press release. These findings were published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal called High Power Laser and Particle Beams. That means other experts in the field checked their work, their methods, and the results before it ever got published.
The results are, well, they're pretty wild. The material was shown to absorb more than 99.99% of incoming radar waves. That is an incredibly high absorption rate. And they achieve this in what's called the Ku band, a frequency range that a lot of modern military and satellite radars actually use.
Another key number they look at is reflection loss, and they measure it in decibels. Here, the material hit a peak of negative 47.46 decibels. Now, when you're talking about radar absorption, the more negative the number, the better. It's just another way of saying that almost none of the radar signal that hit the material managed to bounce back. So how does it compare to other similar materials? This table, which is adapted from the study, puts the loofah composite, NCO2, head-to-head with other advanced materials made from biomass. And as you can see, it holds its own really well. In fact, it offers the widest effective absorption bandwidth of the bunch, all while being just 2 millimeters thick. But what does that actually mean for a real aircraft?
Well, this chart shows a computer simulation they ran. An aircraft with a pretty big radar cross-section of 50 square meters, making it easy to spot from above, gets coated with this material. And boom, its RCS shrinks all the way down to less than 1 square meter. That's a huge drop in how detectable it is. Now, this all sounds pretty incredible, but it's really important that we put these findings into perspective. What's the real-world takeaway from this laboratory breakthrough? So let's just ask the big question. Should we expect to see fighter jets flying around wrapped in a loofah coating anytime soon? The simple answer is no. Not yet, anyway. What we're looking at here is a proof of concept from a lab. All these amazing results are based on tiny, perfectly made samples and computer models. Turning this into a durable, weatherproof coating that you can mass produce and slap on an entire fleet of jets, well, that's a completely different and massive engineering challenge. But the reason for the research is very, very clear and strategic. The sources make it plain that this technology is being designed to counter the threat from space-based radar satellites. You see, a lot of traditional stealth is focused on hiding from radar on the ground. This is all about protecting a plane's vulnerable topside from being seen by eyes in orbit. You know, this whole discovery, from a simple gourd to a complex material that can absorb radar, it really makes you think. It's a great example of this growing field where scientists are looking to sustainable, natural materials for high-tech solutions. And it kind of leaves us with one last big question. What other amazing secrets are just hiding in plain sight, in the most common, everyday things all around us?